and then we'll go from
Okay, we're good.
Hello and welcome. I'm Becky with Malvern Books, and we're very excited to be with you tonight and for another installment of the Austin Community College Creative Writing Department's Literary Coffeehouse. And this evening's featured reader is Scott Semegran and Charlotte Gullick. There's Scott waving, and then Charlotte Gullick will be the host for tonight. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to Charlotte, and so she can kick this off. Charlotte?
Thank you so much, Becky. Welcome, everyone. As usual, I have a couple questions for Becky. What are Malvern store hours right now, please?
Well, thank you for asking, Charlotte. So Malvern Books, we're located at 613 West 29th Street here in Austin, and we're open Tuesday through Sunday, 12 to 5. And so we'd be thrilled to have you all come in and shop with us. And we do carry Scott's books, so if you'd like to come pick them up, we're happy to share those with you and give you recommendations if you'd like. Thanks, Charlotte.
Thank you, Becky. So if folks don't know, Malvern Books is really awesome and unique. They only carry independently published book, which is a real rarity in our community. So you're going to get the stories and voices of people who aren't necessarily in the mainstream, and that's super important. And it's also really good to support your local bookstore. My name is Charlotte Gullick, and I'm chair of the Creative Writing Department. And I'm super excited to hear from our reader and know why he's chosen the selections that he's going to read tonight. But just a couple of announcements. Our last literary coffeehouse of the semester will be on May 16th with Criosto Apache. And we also have summer classes enrolling right now. So if you're thinking of taking a creative writing class, join us. And when we get to the open mic, if you're interested in reading, you have 4 minutes and you just put your name in the chat and I call on you in the order in which you signed up. So it's really cool to be interesting Scott tonight. He has interviewed me. He and Larry doing really interesting things with Austin Liddy Limits. And it's just one of the things that no one told me when I was a young writer is that how important community would be and the connections we make with other people. It's not just the fact that you're a writer and you're working with language, but you're also engaging with like-minded people and finding opportunities to support one another. And Scott has supported me. And so it's really cool to be able to give him some time to talk about his writing and his path, because I think it's a really interesting one that we don't hear enough about. So Scott Semegran is an award-winning writer of 8 books. BlueInk Review described him best as a gifted writer with a wry sense of humor. His latest novel, The Benevolent Lords of Sometimes Island, is about 4 middle school friends who sneak away to an abandoned lake house to evade the wrath of high school bullies, only to become stranded on the lake's desolate island. It won first place in the 2021 Writer's Digest Self-Published Book Awards for middle grade and young adult fiction. His previous novel, To Squeeze a Prairie Dog, an American novel, won 3 book awards, including the 2020 IBPA Benjamin Franklin Award Gold Medal winner for humor. He lives in Austin, Texas with his wife, 4 kids, 2 cats, and a dog. He graduated from the University of Texas at Austin with a degree in English and is one of the hosts of the web series Austin Liddy Limits, along with the fellow award-winning writer Larry Brill. So welcome, Scott.
Hey, Charlotte.
How's it going tonight?
Oh, I'm just going great. I'm very, very happy to be here.
Cool. So what are you going to read tonight?
So you had mentioned my book, The Benevolent Lords of Sometimes Island. This is a book that came out in 2020. And this past fall, it won first place in the Writer's Digest Book Awards, like you had mentioned, for young adult. This book is like if you crossed Lord of the Flies with The Body by Stephen King, and The Body was the inspiration for the movie Stand By Me. And I wrote this book as a response to those 2 books because I had listened to an audiobook of Lord of the Flies, which had an introduction by the author, and he had mentioned that he felt Lord of the Flies was scaled down society. And I didn't feel that boys that I knew at that age would have treated each other in that particular way. I felt like they would have helped each other if they got stranded somewhere. And so that's what this book is about. I've selected 4 passages. They're not very long, but I selected them because A, I'm proud of the writing in these 4 sections, but B, I kind of wanted to mention what I was trying to accomplish by writing these particular passages. And then I guess we could talk about it later if you feel like I accomplished it, but I feel like I do. So I'm going to take off my glasses. I'm going to read the first section. So in this one, just to kind of give it an intro, the 4 friends in this story are going up to Canyon Lake for the first time for a summer trip. They haven't been up there together before. And so this is the first passage. On the way north on I-35, then west on FM 306, the sun began its descent behind the evening clouds, casting pastel reflections across the sky and earth as we headed to the campgrounds, giving our road trip the slightest hint of divinity and otherworldliness. Huddled together in the back of the camper, serenaded by the wail of the rear-mounted engine nestled beneath the back bench that the 3 of us sat on, we listened to a cassette of various pop songs on a tape player that Randy ganked from his mom. Ganking was our slang for stealing. The black rectangle emblazoned with the Sony logo, finished with chrome paint, was a small 1-speaker battery-operated player she bought at Kmart, so she could listen to motivational speakers on tape, but she never did. Brian's parents exchanged goo-goo eyes in the front of the camper. They insisted on listening to Lionel Richie or Barry White albums on their camper's cassette player, which to our younger ears was appalling. Stereo wars between parents and kids weren't unusual, the generational gap on full display through vastly different musical tastes. But Brian's parents didn't seem to mind that we didn't want to enjoy the music of their love. We preferred the kinky music of Prince or the raunchy crooning of Robert Palmer to the sultry R&B that Brian's parents enjoyed. If we felt especially giddy or goofy, then we played Art of Noise or Peter Gabriel, artsy stuff Brian's parents wouldn't be caught dead listening to. Playing our own music in the back allowed them to enjoy theirs in the front without interruption and provided us with some cover, along with the rowdy engine, for our important conversation about our shared conundrum, girls. We marveled that Cindy Hammond's breasts were much larger than they were the year before, and that Kathy McDonald smelled more like a grandmother than a middle schooler. I would later discover why her alluring scent reminded us of an octogenarian when I helped clean out my own grandmother's house soon after she passed away. On her dresser sat a bottle of Chanel number 22, and when I popped the top and curiously sniffed it, the scent awakened memories of standing next to Kathy McDonald in line for a school assembly and secretly inhaling the air between us as if we were sharing an intimate moment, even though we were just waiting to listen to the principal of FDR go on about pep rallies and the dwindling supply of chocolate milk. Memories can do that, though. They can transplant all 5 senses into our brains like some sort of metaphysical incantation. Now, in this particular passage, I wanted to evoke the senses for the reader. And so the sight being the beautiful sky and the sunset, and the sound being the music that the different people in the camper were listening to. And then the smell of the girl that the boy mentions, the perfume that she's wearing. And all of these things are related to memory, the senses unlocking memories for the narrator. So that's what I was trying to accomplish with that particular passage. The next passage, the 4 friends are getting ready to enter their summertime, and instead of enjoying it, they're being hounded by some bullies from the nearby high school. So this passage begins, the last week of school was supposed to be a joyous time for all the students and teachers of Franklin D. Roosevelt Middle School. While the teachers were daydreaming of cruise ship vacations in the Caribbean or road trips to Port Aransas for weekend beach vacations, The students were chattering about their own summer plans. Many bragged about going to a water park in New Braunfels called Schlitterbahn, a silly sounding name which means slippery road in German, a nod to the German heritage of this region of Texas. To ride on the infamous water slides or even tubing down the frigid waters of the nearby Guadalupe River. Others confessed of their desire to visit Astroworld in Houston so they could ride the mind-bending Greased Lightning, a coaster that flew forward, then backward through a single vertical loop, or take the equally long trip to Six Flags over Texas in Dallas for a gut-twisting ride on the Texas Shootout, a 225-foot tall parachute drop ride. Both rides were guaranteed, it was rumored, to make a kid hurl chunks, which was the perfect dare for any of the students of FDR, most of which wanted to come back to school in the fall with bragging rights of bar-free coaster rides or free fall drops. The only kids not enjoying this final week of school were Randy, Miguel, Brian, and I. We spent the last week, like idiots, running for our lives or riding on our bikes for our lives, to be more precise, rather than making summer plans. How could we have been so stupid to agree to keep Bloody Billy's backpack hidden in my closet? Every day after school during that last week, we took the Thousand Oaks gang on a variety of wild goose chases through the wooded areas surrounding the Thousand Oaks and Hidden Oaks neighborhoods, or rode our bikes down the cement ditches, coursing through our neighborhoods like a concrete circulatory system to escape their souped-up sports cars. We even hid in the local fire station, pretending our impromptu visit was a trip down memory lane when our third grade class visited for a field trip, by convincing the station captain that we really wanted to examine the top of the fire ranges for educational purposes. But when Thursday came around, Bloody Billy and the Thousand Oaks gang had our number. We had grown cocky as the week closed and decided we could evade them anywhere and any time, even stopping at a 7-Eleven after school for Slurpees, Cheetos, and candy. The 7-Eleven was a popular hangout for the middle schoolers, and the Thousand Oaks gang patiently waited outside by the bike rack, which was parked around the side of the building and out of sight from the front windows. So when we came outside, already drunk with a sugar buzz from 24-ounce Slurpees and mouths full of gummy bears, they ambushed us, dragging us around the back of the building. Without mincing words, they beat the crap out of us. I literally only remember pushing the glass door open for Randy, Miguel, and Brian, then someone grabbing my arm and dragging me behind the building. By the time I figured out who was dragging me, and not knowing what happened to my friends, although I could hear them screaming, I witnessed a fireworks display that was unparalleled in my experience before or since. When the fireworks dissipated and the ringing in my ears stopped, I remember looking up at Bloody Billy from the hot asphalt. He looked pissed, really pissed. He cracked his knuckles, which were covered in blood. I assumed it was my blood. I know you have it. You better tell me where it is before you get a beating that is worse than any nightmare. Now, the saying, he was beaten senseless, is a cliche, but there is quite a bit of truth in it. Because even though Billy was talking to me, he might as well have been speaking to a rock. I could hear his words, but my brain couldn't parse any of my thoughts into a cogent answer. In fact, all I could think about was where my Slurpee had gone. I was enjoying it immensely when he snatched me, and I still had the taste of it in my mouth. And that the asphalt underneath me was very hot, searing the skin on my forearms and lower back. I should have just told him that the backpack was hidden behind a plumbing vent in my closet back home, and that he could drive me there, and I would simply get it for him. But I didn't do that. I just babbled senselessly. I'm gonna count to 3, he growled, grabbing my t-shirt at the neck hole, then pulled me closer. His breath smelled of Big Macs and cigarettes. And if you don't tell me where it is, then lights out. You got it, dickhead? So in this particular section, I wanted to kind of elicit some nostalgia for the 80s. I had mentioned some places that kids of the time liked going to. And I also wanted to talk about the bond between these friends, and that one of their bonds was that they were terrorized by these bullies. And I also wanted to mention the senses again, where the sense of touch, he mentions the searing hot asphalt, the pain that comes from being beaten, and also the smell of the bully's breath, which is very specific, Big Macs and cigarettes. I just thought that would be an effective way of getting into the narrator's head a little bit. So this next section, the four friends decide that they're going to sneak away back to the lake after discovering that there's some places up there that they can hide from the bullies. And they pay a teenager to take them back up to Canyon Lake, which is, about 30 miles from where they live. And so the teenagers pick them up in he's got a Bronco. And this is their introduction to Tony, the teenager. I often look back at my time in middle school like it was a dream. It certainly seems like a dream sometimes. That's what happens when you get older and your past zooms away into history, like looking at your younger self shrinking in the rearview mirror of a speeding car. When thinking back, I marvel at the freedom my friends and I had, at the audacity that we had. We definitely took it for granted. Nowadays, in our ever more connected world, we seem to have less freedom and less courage. I mean, on the one hand, we, the human race, have more information at our disposal than we've ever had before. But on the other hand, our constant desire to tell the world what we're doing at every given moment and our willingness to allow our devices to monitor our every moves means we've given up our anonymity, and in doing so, some of our freedom and adventurousness. But in 1986, once we left our homes in the watchful eyes of our parents, there was no one watching us or tracking us or telling us what to do. We were free to do whatever we wanted, as long as we didn't get caught by our parents or were home when we said we'd be home. Good times indeed. I distinctly remember a couple things about Tony's Bronco. One, the inside of the cab smelled like cigarettes, mildew, stale beer, and sun-baked vinyl. It smelled like punk rock. To me, it smelled like the summer of 1986. And two, the Bronco rattled like it was about to catastrophically fall apart. Every time Tony drove over a bump or crevice, it felt and sounded like the Bronco was going to explode, but it never did. Something magically held it together, like divine intervention, or just pure luck, which is also a form of magic. And Tony kept on gripping that steering wheel tightly as if letting it go would lead to the end of us all. The Bronco must have been a beast to drive, but you wouldn't have known it by Tony's demeanor. He looked free as a bird behind that steering wheel. He oozed satisfaction while he played Let It Be by The Replacements on the cassette deck and drove us north on I-35, the cab filled with smoke and our hearts filled with joy. We asked our older teenage chauffeur all kinds of questions about the lake and the lake house and the campgrounds and his job at the marina, and of course, Victoria. Once we arrived at the mysteries of love and the opposite sex, our questions revealed our naivete. Many of the tidbits of information we had acquired from our moron acquaintances about girls were like the tropes of science fiction, more like tropes of science fiction than reality after a while. Tony couldn't help but laugh. "Where did you guys learn this shit?" he said, placing another cigarette between his teeth, then pressing the car lighter button. "None of you have been with a girl, have you?" He looked at me, then the rest of my friends in the rearview mirror. Our silence was our acknowledgement. When the car lighter popped up, he pulled it from the dash and lit his cigarette, the fiery orange center of the lighter singeing the end of his smoke, then quickly inserted it back. "Don't you boys worry. I'll tell you the truth about women this weekend." "Great," I said, looking out the window at the passing businesses and ranch homes along the access road of I-35. There was a lot more to marvel at along the interstate on the way to FM 306 than you would think. There was a junkyard, a classic car museum, an oddball attraction with the tantalizing name of Snake Farm. But none of these things were as exciting as the prospect of learning about girls, the truth about girls, from an older teenager that was as cool and badass as Tony. "We can't be men without knowledge, right?" "Right," Tony drawled, then chuckled. Smoke seeped out of his clenched teeth. So in this particular passage, I was going for memory and how memory is special for William, particularly when he thinks back about this particular time and the freedom that he and his friends had. It's something that's very different than how it is nowadays with kids. And I remember as a kid growing up in the 80s, I would go to my friend's house. I would leave at 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock. And it astonishes me now that my mom had no idea where I was. She had no way of finding me. If I told her I was somewhere, she just had to trust that I was there. And that's kind of what these boys are doing. They're sneaking off to the lake. But I also wanted to kind of evoke the senses again with this particular passage. So there's touch, there's smell, there's sound, particularly like the cab of the car and the things that he sees on the side of the road. So these I wanted to kind of evoke those particular senses. So I have one more passage, my last one. So this passage is later in the book. And without trying to give any spoilers, the kids go out to the lake. The bullies kind of pursue them out there. And then they get trapped on an island. And then they're on the island for quite a few days without food and water. And at first, it doesn't seem like it's a dangerous situation. But then after a few days, they start to realize that they're kind of in dire straits. And at this point, the narrator, William, who is narrating the book as his older self, looking back at his younger self, realizes that this particular point in time is a kind of a turning point for him as a human. So it goes, Randy closed his eyes and soon snored softly. He must have been more tired than he thought. Me, I wasn't tired at all. And I couldn't lay still long because the rough ground with its pebbles, sticker burrs, and dried twigs stabbed my ribs and spine through my t-shirt. Every few minutes, I would have to fidget and find a new position for my body to lay before repeating the process again in hopes for at least a little comfort. It was useless, though, and nothing made it more apparent that I wasn't home than lying on a hard, rough ground without a roof over my head or a blanket to keep me warm. This was the first time in my conscious memory that I ruminated about life and the real danger I found myself in. Before the boat wreck on Sometimes Island, I don't think I contemplated my existence and the possibility that my life could end. It was a sobering experience for a middle schooler. I thought about my parents and wondered how much my mom missed me. Surely at that point, she knew me and my friends were missing. How much pain am I causing her? I thought. Would she be mad at me for running away? I even missed my stepdad, Steve, and would have preferred his solemn presence to the predicament I was in on that unforgiving island with the wind laughing at us and the owl dropping dead mice. I thought about my friends' parents and wondered how they felt too. Then mental images of all the things I would miss if I perished on that island marched through my mind, a strange parade of unfortunate missed opportunities, like my first kiss, which hadn't happened yet since I hadn't met a girl I wanted to kiss by that point, or getting my driver's license and first car at 16 years of age, which I would later learn would be a 1978 Honda Civic with a 60 horsepower engine, the perfect car for me. Or going to the senior prom with Carly Simpson, who would then go down in history as the first girl I kissed and the first one to break my heart in two. She crushed me after that prom. But if I were to die on Sometimes Island, then none of these things would come to be. I would rot on that island, my bones collecting dust and housing spiders, along with the skeletons of Brandy, Brian, and Miguel. My eyes watered, my heart ached. Knowing that coming out to the lake was my idea, I felt an oppressive amount of guilt, even if the Thousand Oaks gang had something to do with it. I even felt bad for Bloody Billy, if you can believe that. I was sure his mom missed him too, but on second thought, decided that even his own mother probably didn't like him. He was much too much of a degenerate to be loved. My immature mind put the blame for our predicament squarely on Billy, the one who had put us on the path to escape to the cabin of seclusion and our eventual wreck on Sometimes Island. It's all that jerk's fault, I whispered to myself. Yup, his fault. I imagined Bloody Billy at the bottom of the lake, his face and neck bloated, bottom feeders sucking on his blanched arms, his shirt billowing in the water, while moonbeams danced around him and his backpack lying in the silty lake bed not too far from him, just out of reach. A school of minnows pecking at it. I had no idea how deep that lake was at that point, where he vanished, or if the moonbeams could even reach the bottom of the lake, or if there were bottom feeders down there. But just the idea of this soothed me. I joyfully thought about Billy's watery grave while looking up at the stars. Now, in this particular passage, I wanted to kind of like show the stakes for William of his friends had been ratcheted up because they didn't have food, they didn't have water. I think at this point, one of them had been bitten by a snake. There was an element of danger that I wanted to kind of have William talk about, but also it was kind of a blossoming moment for him because, you know, he thinks at that point he could probably die and he's just 12 years old. So he has a lot of remorse for the choices that he made and putting his friends in those kind of, you know, that kind of danger, and also worrying that, you know, his mom is worried about him because he probably knows that by that point she realizes that he's gone. So anyway, those are passages from the Benevolent Lords of Sometimes Island. If you'd like to get a copy, they carry it at Malvern Books. You can call them or go by and pick up a copy.
Can you hold up the cover a little more closely to the camera so people can see?
Sure.
Are those owl eyes?
Yes, those are owl eyes up in the clouds. And this is a lake island. So I kind of just wanted to show some of the themes of the book. The owl kind of comes in and out of the story as a symbol of the encroaching bit of nature. What was that?
Sorry, you don't have to keep holding it up. Sorry.
Right. The owl comes in and out of the story and symbolizes a few things, but one of them is that it's kind of like the encroaching danger that's out there because the owl drops a dead mouse on them at one point and freaks them out because the mouse is disemboweled. And so they realize that, you know, there's creatures out there that are dying and they could be one of them. And also the owl is free to leave the island whenever it wants and the boys cannot. So they watch it wistfully as it flies away a few times because it has the freedom to go where it wants. So
those were terrific passages. And I don't know if you can't see when you're reading, but there are a lot of really wonderful comments in the chat about how much people are enjoying the storytelling, but also the element of nostalgia. You know, like being able to speak to a generation through the details.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the first things I want to ask you is about the cover. Then just so for folks know, and Scott has heard this from me, one of the reasons I wanted to feature him is that he is someone who is an award-winning self-published writer who is moving into more traditional publishing. And I think there are a lot of misconceptions about what it means to be a writer and also what it means to be a self-published writer. And but so just the cover, like you have control over that, but you didn't design it. So can you tell us a little bit about the decisions that go into that, and why do you hire a graphic designer and not do it yourself?
Right. So when I started self-publishing in 2008, which seems like forever ago now, but that's when two companies kind of started to launch off. It was Amazon KDP, which is how people get books on their Kindle, and another company called Smashwords. And at that time, I was creating my own covers. I didn't know what I was doing. And I was like most other self-publishers where I just put an unedited document out somewhere and it was converted into an ebook and then people could get it. And I had, you know, hastily put together a cover. But after 10 years of doing that and really not getting anywhere, I realized that I needed to treat what I was doing like I was a real publisher. And so I studied on what that meant. And that meant hiring an editor for the manuscript, hiring a graphic designer for the cover, hiring proofreaders, getting beta readers, just the whole process that how a publisher works. And so this particular cover was designed by my friend Andrew Leeper, who is a graphic designer. And he also designed the cover for my book, To Squeeze a Prairie Dog. And, you know, he and I would have meetings about what I was trying to accomplish. And I would talk to him about the style of book and what kind of book this is. And this is a suspense book for young adults. And so I had an idea of how I wanted the cover to look, the themes that I wanted to evoke. And I also wanted it to look as good as any book that you could get in the bookstore. because I want to stand out from other self-published authors. I'm not the only self-published author that does this. There's a lot of us that do this process, but we treat it like we're a business and a publisher, and we have to spend money to do it. And for a lot of people, that is a barrier to entry to go that far. But for me, I mean, I've been a writer since the week I got out of college, which was 1993. And I've approached different avenues. I've had work published in literary journals. I was a cartoonist for The Statesman for a couple years. I've had poetry published in poetry journals. I've been paid in different ways as a writer, and I just wanted to be professional. And so self-publishing was another way for me to get my work out there. But I learned that to be taken seriously, I had to really know what I was doing. And so I learned all those different steps of being a self-published author.
And do you mind speaking a little bit, because, and I'm going to say some, I don't mean them offensively, but there's some stereotypes about self-publishing that I think you're addressing through the beta readers and proof copy editors and editors, but that people have looked down at self-publishing, partly because some of the reasons you just named, people weren't editing their work or having another viewpoint on it. But I really feel like that has changed in the last few years, and that what's coming out of the self-publishing world, there's some really, really awesome competitive stuff there. And can you speak to that for a minute, please?
Yeah, the thing is that when self-publishing came about, before self-publishing, there was a gatekeeper, and you had to get picked up by a publisher. And if you got picked up by a publisher, then your book had to sell and make money. If you weren't picked up by a publisher before the 80s, you would just go away in obscurity. Nothing would happen with your work. Or if you were picked up and it didn't do well, same thing, you would be dropped. And it was all geared around money. Whereas with self-publishing, they kind of got rid of that gatekeeper of a publishing company. And so the flip side of that is that it's so easy to self-publish that people don't take the time to do what a traditional publisher does. And the reason why books take so long to come out on a traditional publisher, and it's average of 1 to 3 years, like if someone sells a manuscript to a publisher, it could take up to 3 years to come out because it's edited. It may need to be rewritten. They need to get a graphic design. All these things I'm talking about. Publicity starts months before a book launch. All these things. And with self-publishing, you don't necessarily have to do those things, but then your book will suffer for it, right? I think a lot of people that go to self-publishing don't have the strength to listen to what an editor would have to tell them about their, to get that criticism back about what they have. And it took me a long time to build up the self-confidence to talk to people about my work and not take it so personally. But once I kind of got to that level, like I actually enjoy talking to my editor. You've been one of edited some of my books. I really enjoy that process, but some people may not like that. But the thing that people think about self-publishing is it's not necessarily a cliche. It's true. There's a lot of work out there that's not very good because people don't take the time to go through that. But a lot of people are discovering, if you do take the time to go through that, and traditional published authors are discovering this too, that there is potential to make more money because you're doing it yourself. And you get a larger cut of what comes back in revenue. And so if you're savvy enough as an author to learn about publicity and marketing, and then to have someone edit your book to be the strongest it can be and hire a graphic designer to create an eye-catching cover, which is very, very important, then you could be a successful self-published author. And there's a lot of people that make a lot of money self-publishing, particularly in romance and mystery, because those particular genres are very popular. I know some self-published authors that make 6 figures a year cranking out, romance books.
Thank you so much. I think one of the things that you said that may answer some of the questions in the chat is you said, get the book the best that it can be. And from what I'm hearing from you is that, and I don't know if this is accurate or not, is that you've learned that you can't do that all by yourself. Like you need some other people.
Yes. Publishing, writing's not a team work, is not a team player sport, but publishing is a team player sport. So And just like having a great team, you need a good coach, you need good people for support, and writing can be that too when you want to publish a book. So what I've learned from editing is that if you have an editor that agrees with what you're trying to accomplish and can help you accomplish that goal, that as perfect as you may think the manuscript is, it could be better. And I've learned that a lot in editing, that process. And also from beta readers and proofreaders, that when you think something's perfect, it goes out and it's not. There's typos, there's misspellings, there's all kinds of stuff. And it takes a team to kind of find all that. And with the self-published book that hasn't gone through that, I mean, if they get a typo in your first paragraph, they'll stop reading. They'll think it's garbage. They'll think no one took the time, and you want your book to shine. So, editing's important, book cover's important, but all that stuff takes time too. And it's hard to kind of go through that process. I think a lot of writers don't realize how long publishing takes for a good book to come out. It takes a long time.
And it sounds like, because one of the questions is how do you build your confidence, but it sounds like making sure, and I'm not trying to flatter myself because we have worked together. So, but
right.
Like finding someone who you think gets where you're trying to go, and they're helping you get there versus putting their vision on top of you.
Right. So, when most people go to find an editor, they usually send samples, maybe the first 5 or 10 pages. And, I've had where I've sent stuff out to people, and when you get that excited response from somebody like, "Ooh, I like this. I want to work with this." That's the first thing that tells you, oh, this may be someone that's a good teammate for me, because they like the sample. They see the potential in what I'm doing. And believe it or not, people can tell if you're a good writer in the first page or two. Sometimes the first sentence. And so an editor can tell if someone is a good writer, or at least has the potential. And so hearing that from an editor should give somebody some confidence. I mean, it surely does for me. If someone comes back and says, hey, this is great, I want to work with you, that's a great pat on the back.
I could have so many questions for you, Scott, but we really only have time for 2 more. But one is something you shared in a pre-show. Benevolent Lords 1.
Yes.
The Writer's Digest. How many books were entered?
1,600 were entered, and mine came out first place. And I won $1,000. So there is some avenues for making, money in self-publishing if that's what people want, or if they feel like that's what they need to do to be successful. Money is not the motivator for me, because I have a day job and I make a good salary. And writing's my favorite part. But for a lot of people, the money part's the validation or making sure that they get eyeballs. And those are some things that self-published writers can do. Writer's Digest is it's a very prestigious magazine. It's been around for a very long time. And so to have them rank my book first out of 1,600 was very shocking to me, because that's a lot of books. So for have mine come out on top, I was very honored with that.
So do you mind, what do you do for a day job? Do you mind answering that?
I'm a webmaster for the state of Texas for a government agency.
And you have a full-time job. You have full family. So when do you find time to write? So
the last 3 novels that I've written, I wrote 90% of the novel on my lunch break. So the last 3, I had a plan. I had a basic outline. It wasn't very detailed, but basic enough that when I sat down at 12 with my soup or whatever it was that was there and the computer, I knew I had an hour to an hour and 15 minutes to write. And if I could get 250 to 500 words out in an hour, then I knew I could do enough for the next session. And so I've had a lot of writers ask me that, when do you write? And I'm like, on my lunch breaks. I have an hour, I have 5 hours a week, because on the weekends I usually rest. I hang out with my family, hang out with my kids. And if I have any notes, I'll jot it on my phone. And then that next Monday, lunch break comes, and if I got 250 to 500 words, I accomplished what I needed to do. So, and if you do the math of that, 500 words a day, you can have a novel in 9 months. So fortunately, I had all the last 3. It took me about 6 months to write each one, the first draft.
And a novel, self-publishing a novel is only slightly cheaper than having a child and sending it to college, right?
That's true. That's true. Yeah. There's a lot of things, but I treat it like a business. If anybody had their own business, they'd want, if you don't put money in your business is going to fail. So being an independent writer is the same way.
I have one more question for Scott. And so if you are interested in doing the open mic, you have 4 minutes, and in support of Malvern's reading guidelines, please no racially motivated profanity, no sexual assault scenes, no torture to animals, and that you're thinking consciously about how you're in space with other people. Of course, you can write what you need to write, but when you read material, that you want to be aware that what you might read might be triggering for someone else. And so just being considerate in the choices. I think we had great examples from Scott tonight.
I do apologize for profanity that I had. I do realize that offends some people. And I'm sorry. I try not to have too
no,
too much in those selections, but
no, I'm just teasing that it costs $100,000 to publish a book. So while folks are signing up, and there's been a lot of thank yous for really great work and being generous with your philosophy and your approach to writing. One of the things that I am really struck by hearing you tonight, Scott, is it's part of the total package. The cover, having beta readers, and for people who don't know, these are early readers who answer specific questions, or having a copy editor. It really sounds like you are thinking about the reader. Like it's not your writing isn't about yourself in that sense, but it's a shared relationship with readers, and that care of even making sure all the words are spelled correctly, or that we've engaged the 5 senses so they can imagine themselves in the scene along with the character. So do you have any thoughts about how you think about readers?
Well, the first draft is for me. That's always for me. And I enjoy that time where this is my time where I have my imagination going. And I don't even think about readers at that point, because that is literally my favorite part of all of it. More than the $1,000, more than the award, more than any of it is the writing part. But then I realized that when I'm done, someone's going to consume it and read it. And I want them to enjoy it. And so if I have a particular goal, like with this book, it's an adventure suspense book, but it's also for people who long for the 80s or remember what it was like to be a teenager. I want those things to come across. And sometimes they don't in the first draft. Sometimes you miss the mark on some things. We had some discussions about things. Sometimes things unintentionally came up, just unintentional bias, just things that come out when you're just blah, you just type in a bunch of words and you go back and read and you're like, I shouldn't have said that. Not that you had bad intentions. It's just stuff that comes out. And so having an editor, having a proofreader, having beta readers is very helpful, because even when it gets through all those points and it gets to the beta readers, my only instruction for them, besides I hope you enjoy it, is tell me any typos you find, please. They're like cockroaches, and there always are, even after there's the published book and it gets out there and it's like, I had like 30 people deal with this book, and I pick it up and it's like, I still find typos and it drives me nuts, but at least there's only a couple, because it's hard.
You've said so many wonderful, loving, profound things tonight, but the thing that might stink is that typos are like cockroaches.
They are, those bastards. You think
it's such a fantastic analogy,
right? And it's hard to not get mad at the proofreader or the beta, when they, but it's just one of those things. I have a copy of Lonesome Dove that must be like the 10th edition. It's one of those small, super fat that I found like 5 typos in. That book won the Pulitzer Prize. How does it have typos in it on the 10th edition? Shouldn't somebody have corrected it by then? I don't know.
Well, there's a BuzzFeed article about why we can't catch our own typos. And it says, that writing is a higher order thinking thing and that typos are a lower order. Maybe it's just that the storytelling's so good, Scott. That's why people didn't find the typos.
That's true. Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight and sharing your experience with us.